Chapter 3.6 Level 5 Purpose: to exercise the being in the creation of complementary and conflicting postulates, in accordance with the postulate failure cycle chart. The completion of level 4 signals that the being is ready to work with pure postulates. In point of fact, he has no choice in the matter, for only by the creation of postulates is he able to progress further. Nothing else is capable of stimulating his mind, and so producing material for time breaking. At level 2 the being only has to think of something in order to have mental mass flying round his ears. By the time level 4 is complete, only the creation of raw postulates will trigger his mind in the slightest. This is as it should be. Raw postulates are very rare things in life these days, which is precisely why the being's mind is so little triggered by life, once level 4 is completed. Humanity at large does not create effects by direct postulates. They cannot use direct postulates. They work on systems of getting things done. A man may shout and rave at you, but it's all noise and bluster. The actual postulate content of his tirade is virtually nil. If he were capable at handling postulates, he would speak in a whisper, and people would feel compelled to do as he asks. The power of the silent postulate. Mankind has many systems of power. Wealth is one of them. It permits a man to make his postulates effective, when the true power of his postulate is close to zero. As the being comes up the line, he progressively abandons his systems of power, and returns to the direct postulate. And in so doing, his life becomes incredibly simple and uncomplicated. So when we reach level 5 we are, as they say, down to the nitty-gritty, that is, the basic building blocks upon which the mind is built, which are the 4 basic postulates, which go to make up life and games play. A postulate is a causative consideration. It is a consideration which contains an intention that something will occur. The flavor of its meaning is contained in the old Latin, postulare, to demand. One creates a postulate. Like one creates anything else, one brings it into existence in a certain location in space. Early on, you may like to surround your postulates with mass. That is quite all right. You can create them with pink stripes and funny hats on if you wish. They are, after all, your creations. Later on you'll be able to do without the mass, and just create the pure postulate. A being tends to feel, at the completion of level 4, that there is very little of his mind left. This is not so. The truth of the matter is that the vast majority of the mind is still there intact, at the completion of level 4. The illusion of vanishment only occurs, because there are so few pure postulates in everyday life, to stimulate the mind, so it stays out of existence. Get a spear through your guts and you'll soon realize that you've got a lot of mind hanging around still, as those mental masses begin to fly around you once more. That spear, you see, is a bit of solid postulate, and will get things jangling once more. So, even though level 4 is complete, we still have a residual hard core of mind left, and our job on level 5 is to bring it into view, so it can be time broken. As your power of postulate increases on level 5, so, you'll be able to spring more and more of this into view. This in turn will improve your power of postulate even more, which will permit you to spring even deeper levels into view. And so on, until the job is finally done. How capable will you be? I don't know, for to the very best of my knowledge no one has got there yet. You write and tell me about it. I do know this though, the sky is a lot higher than you think. Even when you can knock a couple of planets out of orbit with the whisper of a thought, you're still only a babe in arms in terms of your full potential. Only life has ever put a limit to the ability of life. One last word before we go into level 5 proper. Be sure you want to make the trip. There's no going back, you know. But even now, can you go back and enjoy the games you played as a 5-year-old? Once you walk this road, you can't get off it. My advice is to take someone with you, or you'll soon be running a terrible scarcity of people to talk to about the really interesting things in life. If you don't fancy yourself as a being with godlike abilities, on the other hand, then the top of level 4 is the place to quit. You are still more or less human, and level 5 will soon change all that. Are you coming? Good. Nice to have you along. At this point, take out the postulate failure cycle chart and study it. I advise you to make your own copy of it on a piece of cardboard. This can be folded to fit into a plastic sachet, and so be carried around with you without getting all crinkly and dog-eared. The chart is worth studying, and there is always something to be learned by looking at it. Indeed, it will soon become a very valued possession. There is a great symmetry and beauty about the chart, which will grow on you as you use it. There is a great oddity about this chart. It is almost impossible to remember it, which is quite understandable once one begins to appreciate its true significance. It took me 6 months to get it exactly right. The chart is divided into 8 major levels. Each level is subdivided into 2 sections. This gives us a total of 16 possible game situations regarding an effect. You'll also notice that the chart is divided into origin and receipt, and self and others. Self and others is self-explanatory. Origin means the originator in a game. Receipt means the responder in a game. Receipt responds to origin. Origin causes receipt to respond. It's purely a matter of who starts, or originates, the game. So we have 16 possible game situations regarding an effect. There aren't any others. There's a standing prize going for the first being who can find any. The 16 consist of 4 overt overwhelms, 4 motivator overwhelms, 4 origin of games, and 4 receipt of games. Life goes from 8B to 1A. We work from 1A to 8B. Always. The reason for this is that later games occlude earlier ones. So we start late and go early. This means we are running life in reverse. You'll soon get used to this, though early on it can be a bit puzzling. We don't have any choice in the matter. Have you ever tried peeling an onion from the inside? You peel it from the outside inwards. You peel your mind the same way. Your mind is very much like an onion, in this respect. If you want to waste time, you'll run the chart from 8B to 1A. It's a great way to get nowhere fast. It's also a guaranteed way to put yourself into deep apathy. Oh boy, if you really wanted to louse this level 5 up, that is one sure way to do it. Talk about booby traps. The being in life enters games with an effect at 8B. After many vicissitudes, that is, game losses, he quits playing games with this effect at 1A. No more games are possible with this effect once 1A is reached, as all 4 postulates are now in failure, that is, overwhelm, both as self-determined and pan-determined. Check it through and you will see that this is so. He now goes back in, at 8B, with the substitute effect, and starts the circuit all over again. Talk about futility. So the chart is really circular, and 8B should be folded round to join 1A, forming a cylinder. I believe there is something in Eastern religion called the wheel, which is similar to this. Or maybe they had this chart once out east, and lost it. The next point is that the chart only shows the self-determined postulates. The pan-determined postulates, you have to put in yourself. There's no difficulty in this, for they are always the complementary postulate to the self-determined postulate. To save you looking them up in the theory section, the list follows. Self-determined, must be known. Pan-determined, must know. Self-determined, mustn't be known. Pan-determined, mustn't know. Self-determined, must know. Pan-determined, must be known. Self-determined, mustn't know. Pan-determined, mustn't be known. You'll need to learn this list. It's not difficult. Next, I'd like to recap for you, so you are absolutely sure of what we are doing on level 5. It's necessary to be very clear in your mind on the differences between the following life situations. A no-game situation. This is a complementary postulate situation. You look at a wall. The wall is there to be known, and so you know it. It's be known and know, complementary postulates. This is not a game situation. There is no postulate conflict. All the postulates match up. I leave it to you as an exercise to spot life situations for the other 3 sets on the above list. Editor's note. Here they are again. SD. Mustn't be known. PD. Mustn't know. SD. Must know. PD. Must be known. SD. Mustn't know. PD. Mustn't be known. End editor's note. Remember, complementary postulates enhance affinity. Conflicting postulates detract from affinity. A voluntary game situation. This is a conflicting postulate situation. You look at a wall. The wall is there to be known, and you decide you don't want to know about it. It's be known and not know, conflicting postulates. Thus, this is a game situation, for there is postulate conflict. The postulates are in opposition. I leave it as an exercise for you to spot life situations for the other 3 sets on the above list. A compulsive game situation. This is identical to the voluntary game situation, except that the game is compulsive. The being feels compelled to play it. He's lost his freedom of choice in the matter. He sees the wall and has no choice but to not know it. While the game is voluntary, the being can always end it by adopting complementary postulates. For example, he stops fighting the wall and adopts a no postulate regarding its be known postulate. End of game. All games can be ended in this manner. No exceptions. If you want to stop any game you are engaged in, you only have to adopt the complementary postulate to the one being held by your opponent, and the game promptly ends. He too, of course, can end it by adopting the complementary postulate to yours. You cannot force any being into a game who insists upon adopting complementary postulates to your own. Thus, a being who is free from the compulsion to play games can never be forced into a game against his choice. He'll play only as long as he wants to play, then if you try and force him to continue, he'll merely go into a complementary postulate situation with you. There's nothing you can do about it. I mean, you can't even complain that you've lost the game, for you've clearly won it. Or have you? For you never overwhelmed him. I leave you to ponder this, for it has a large number of interesting philosophical ramifications. But what of the being in a compulsive games condition? He must go on playing. He cannot ever end the game. He's in it for keeps. He must go on, and on, and on. Just like time goes on, and on, and on, in the universe. Now do you see what I mean when I say that in the absence of games, space and time cease to exist? The whole universe is kept chugging along through time and endless change, by life engaged in a compulsive games condition. A being achieves nirvana when he can adopt complementary postulates with the whole universe. Then, and only then, can he leave the universe and go in search of pastures new. Until that point is reached, the being is always to some degree trapped in the universe. The route out is from the compulsive playing of games, through the voluntary playing of games, to an ending of all games by the adoption of complementary postulates, and so, the achieving of a non-game situation, nirvana. So let us be very clear about the direction in which we are traveling on level 5. There is nothing wrong with playing games, for games are fun. But there is an awful lot wrong with having to play games. The trap is not in the playing of games. The trap lies in the fact that the playing of games leads to the compulsive playing of games. That leads straight into every trap this universe contains. We only have to return to the being, his freedom of choice in the playing of games, and the job is done. Now, once more take out the postulate failure cycle chart. The chart can be divided into 8 games levels and 8 overwhelm levels. Game and overwhelm are all part of games, but we need to separate these levels from a practical point of view. First, the game levels. In each one of these levels there are actually 4 postulates on the board. The term on the board comes from the game of chess, and I use it in the sense of in play. There is your self-determined postulate shown on the chart, your pan-determined postulate not shown on the chart, your opponent's self-determined postulate shown on the chart. Your opponent's pan-determined postulate not shown on the chart is where you are. Your pan-determined postulate is out there where your opponent is. Your opponent's self-determined postulate is where he is. His pan-determined postulate is over where you are. You are trying to get him to adopt your pan-determined postulate. He is trying to get you to adopt his pan-determined postulate. If either succeeds, an overwhelm occurs, and the game is lost or won. The overwhelmer is the victor, the overwhelmed is the vanquished. The overwhelm levels. In each of these 8 overwhelm levels there are only 2 postulates on the board, those of the overwhelmer. His self-determined postulate is still where he is. His pan-determined postulate is now entirely around the vanquished, who is convinced of it. The self-determined postulate of the vanquished has now gone off the board. With it, of course, goes the pan-determined postulate of the vanquished. Both the self-determined and pan-determined postulates of the vanquished are thus off the board, out of play, at the point of overwhelm. Where have they gone to? They are in failure, they are no longer considered tenable in that game. The vanquished may resurge and play another game of this type later in time, but that game with that particular effect is lost in the opinion of the vanquished. So in all 8 game levels on the chart, there are 4 postulates on the board, while in all 8 overwhelm levels on the chart, there are only 2 postulates on the board. In the overwhelm, the vanquished literally buys the pan-determined postulate of the overwhelmer. He considers this pan-determined postulate as his own. Thus, in every overwhelm, we see a misownership of postulate. It's entirely a matter of conviction. The overwhelmed is now convinced that this is the way things are, and so misowns the pan-determined postulate that overwhelmed him. However, as soon as he spots the misownership, the overwhelm vanishes, and his own postulates reappear. Until he misowns the postulate, the overwhelm never occurred. See it? It's all a matter of conviction. It's very necessary, when working at the overwhelm levels of the chart, to be aware of this overwhelm, and the misownership of the pan-determined postulate. These levels don't come apart otherwise. Once the being has fully bought the pan-determined postulate of his opponent, in a life game, he now adopts it as his own self-determined postulate, and moves to the next level upwards on the chart, towards 1A. In the exercises, however, once he frees the misownership at the overwhelm level, he is able to move down in the direction of 8B to the next level of the chart, for these postulates are now once more available to him. If you've been following this closely, you'll have realized that at the overwhelm level, we have the semblance of a no-game situation, for there is no longer any conflict between the postulates. They are, indeed, complementary. Every torturer knows that sufficient torture will render his victim compliant. This is also why a being cannot immediately be free of the entrapping influence of past games, by adopting complementary postulates in all directions in his everyday life. All he will succeed in doing is throwing himself into his past overwhelms. This is why the edict, "Love thy neighbor as thyself," is so incredibly difficult for a being who is heavily enmeshed in games, to apply with any great benefit. I'm not saying it's impossible, and is not a route out, but I am saying that, due to the overwhelm mechanism, it's incredibly difficult to apply across the boards, and so attain nirvana. Level 5 gets over this difficulty by simulating the overwhelm, and thus freeing the being from it. By playing these games in exercise form, he comes to grasp the true nature of the factors involved, and thus is no longer influenced by them. It also gives him a look at his own overt overwhelms, which is quite salutary. We are now almost ready to embark upon level 5. However, before we do so, a word about repair of importance. Level 5 is by far the most destructive of past importances of all the levels. Mental mass is vanished at a truly startling rate. One would expect this to be the case, and we must be prepared for it. I can tell you right now that the only thing that will cause level 5 to grind to a shuddering and painful halt for you is insufficient repair of importance. Indeed, your total progress on this level is determined by how regularly you repair your importances with self-generated ones. Perceptual repair of importance is just not good enough at level 5. Only creative repair of importance will do the trick. So, sort one out if you haven't already done so. If you've successfully completed level 4, one or other of the creative versions will now work for you. This matter is so vital that I'm going to give you, here and now, the details of the level 5 repair session. I don't have to be told that you'll fall flat on your face sooner or later on level 5. So I'll tell you what to do when it happens. This is not me being pessimistic. It's me being realistic. I wouldn't expect any being to start feeling his way through these raw postulates without coming a cropper. You'll learn how to do it properly, but only after you've got your teeth kicked in a few times during the process of learning. This level 5 repair session will quickly get you back in one piece again and fit to carry on. Level 5 repair session. A. Stop doing level 5 exercises. B. Run repair of importance until no further change. C. Time break all mental mass in view. If it's not present time universe mass, time break it. Repeat B. The running of repair of importance, then C. The time breaking of all mental mass. Continue to alternate B and C until all has quieted down, and there is no further change. D. Return to level 5. This repair will always work for you. The trick is to use it before you have to. It's like eating all bran for breakfast. If you eat it, you never have to eat it. The datum behind all this is this: the only mistake on level 5 is to leave a chart level while it's still producing change. Overrun is not harmful at level 5, for the exercises are entirely creative. But, and get this very clearly, if repair of importance needs running, then one doesn't spot that the level is still producing change. And so you leave it. Bingo. Very soon it all collapses round you, and you are wishing that Mum had given birth to anyone but you. So when it all falls apart, you just know you've left a level before you should have done. After you've done the repair, you go back and find the incomplete level. It will stand out like a third ball on a greyhound. Then you run it fully. Then you move on. Until the next time it happens. But you're learning all the time. Eventually you don't make this mistake. And then level 5 runs like a well-oiled dream. So help me, there aren't any other snags on level 5. Just keep your importances topped up, time break as you go, and you'll win all the way. It's very easy to get terribly significant about level 5, simple because you've got deep significances flashing around you all the time, and it's too darned simple to reach out and grab one. Old Mosman proverb. Editor's note. Mosman is a suburb on the lower north shore of Sydney, Australia. It was the residence of the author at the time of writing. End note. Old Mosman proverb. He who grabs at passing significances is running scarcity of them. He should run repair of importance. We now need to take up the sense, or meaning, of the word must on the chart. With one exception, the meaning is got to. It's a striving to make the postulate effective. The only exception is at the overwhelm levels. At the point of overwhelm, must means to the being overwhelmed, cannot help but. It echoes the failure of his postulate in the game. So keep this in mind as you work through the levels. Now we come to the question of what effect do we use when running level 5? We don't. We don't put up effects at level 5. We only time break effects at level 5. At level 5 we only put up postulates. The mind throws up the effects, which we time break. In this way we guarantee that we take the mind apart in the exact manner that it is available. At level 4 you experience the phenomena of taking bits from here, and bits from there, off your time track, while using the 8 classes of overwhelm. Well, at level 5 you will see the same phenomena occurring. The mind comes apart easiest in the sequence in which it is available. This is not necessarily in its temporal sequence. There is no reason why it should come apart in a temporal sequence. Trying to make it do so is merely trying to fit the mind into someone's preconceived idea of how it ought to come apart. It's one of these pieces of fiction that was dreamed up one day by a psychologist who'd never got closer to a mind than observing his guinea pigs in their cages. Because man is such a slave to time, it seemed reasonable, and everyone has been going along with the idea ever since. But it just won't do, if you ever hope to get your mind apart cleanly and efficiently. You just have to take it apart in the sequence that it's available. You just put up the postulates, time break everything that shows up. Then, when putting up the postulates produces no more change, you move on to the next level. It's as simple as that. In fact, it's so simple that you'll have to resist the urge to make it more complicated. When putting up these postulates, don't be miserly. There's no shortage of them, you know. Churn out as many of them as you need. If they fade out, then create some more. Abundance is of the essence. Put them where you like. Just make sure you keep the self postulates separated from the others postulates. That is all. Early on you'll find that as one level goes null, you find yourself sliding into the next level on the chart. Later this stops, and you have to do it all yourself. This, again, is as it should be. One final point. As you move from level 4B to 5A, and from level 8B to 1A, you will feel a definite flip. This is the valence shift that exists between these levels. Early on it can be quite startling. Later you just note it in passing. Don't try and rush things at level 5. There's always an urge to race round and round the levels, rather like writing faster and faster so as to finish off before your pen runs out of ink. Resist this urge. Null each level as you go. One of the signs of overrun of a level is boredom. It's a sure sign that it's time you moved on. You will soon learn to strike that happy medium of leaving a level as soon as it goes null. Always run repair of importance between levels. If a level is still alive at session end, then pick up that same level again next session. Start your sessions with plenty of repair of importance, then time break out the day's happenings, and off you go. You'll find quite a number of incidents that showed up at level 3 and level 4, showing up again at level 5. You're just taking more of them, that's all. You'll continue to do so until you've got the lot. Then they time break out completely and you'll never have them cropping up again. These are the stickers I mentioned back at level 3. Indeed, very soon you'll probably never even think of them again. They'll have no more significance to you than the number of the bus ticket that you casually glanced at that wet Wednesday night back in 1962. Just keep going around and round that chart, level by level, time breaking as you go, and running plenty of repair of importance, and you'll make it to Nirvana. Remember, there's no place to go after level 5. There's no level 6. And don't get sidetracked into playing around with other goals. To know is the granddaddy of them all. All the roads lead back to the goal, to know. So stay on that one from beginning to end, and you get there fastest. It took me a year of research to discover this truth, and there's no need for you to waste time. And now, a final word about these practical exercises. Don't become an exercise fanatic. You won't get there any faster by making a hermit out of yourself in your urge to get there. Live your life too. Just fit your exercises into your normal life. That is always the best way. Good luck. Dennis H. Stephens, Mosman, New South Wales, Australia. February 1978.